Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religions. And I'm hoping for just a good set of casual conversations tonight. We'll see what happens. But for now, a little light reading. This is an idea for idea translation from what we have from the most confirmed text. The most thorough text. I'm using Blue Letter Bible, Jusinius and Strong's. Their definitions widely accepted from the Masoretic texts. Genesis 12. The Exalted Father journeys to our place of limitation. They've been calling it Abram journeys to Egypt, but being what Abram means and everything, literally the Exalted Father. And it was commanded by Jehovah, that is necessary in the seven spirits of God, and promised by the Exalted Father that he will travel and carry away from the firm earth the born native, that meaning us, to build a temple to the chief father. That is, we are the temple, and you've heard that idea several times. A built temple in place of the firm earth, which they will behold and regard. In other words, we will see it. That referring to our heaven. And him, Abram, saying, I have wrought and prepared a triumphant increase from amid the Gentile Goy. That means not Israeli people, not the nation of Israel or people who struggle with God, but people who presently don't struggle with God, i.e. atheists, agnostic, etc., that will bless and magnify greater the name of conspicuous position. That right there, meaning the one whose name you would recognize and of conspicuous position, and or Jesus, and magnify greater their blessings of liberality, so freedoms. So it's promising that through heaven, non-believers are given freedoms. I will bless and salute them and lighten their bitter curse. That is, that you're going to die on a planet. I will lighten the curse of blaspheming for revealed kindred. That is, if you take it back, that's like not a problem. Of him from the blood-dyed red earth. This indicating the end of the earth and what condition it will be. That is, people died there, quote unquote, stained with blood, something like that. And carried by the Exalted Father forward were they of Jehovah's promise, the promise just made in the previous, with an enveloping covering, like something causing a shadow onto the earth. Carried forward to the Exalted Father in perfect spiritual order and grace changed the diverse people that year. This year, not literal 365, but more like the same way it's been using the word day, meaning in those times, into family building block sons who came out of those burned by the mountaineer of the looming mountain. That is to say, the one who's in charge of the heavens, or the Father, or the Father of all, or the Exalted Father. All of those phrases. And carried away by the Exalted Father, there you go, forward was the marriage princess, the existent wife, who emerged as an entity in the enveloping covering of the kindred. That is, I know it's chunky, and I spend so much time explaining this, but if you watch enough of this, you'll see that it's consistent. Carried away by the Exalted Father, or him that conducts end times. Forward was the marriage princess, That's the idea of the wedding ceremony, the feast, where the people are married to him who's in charge of their heaven. The existent wife, that is, we presently already exist, who emerged as an entity, that means born on the planet, in the enveloping covering, meaning when heaven darkens the skies, of the kindred, that means we're related to those in heaven, the family building sons and daughters who emerged as entities and were absolutely every kind of riches and were gathered, and those, meaning were valuable, and those emerging entities were refreshed as bodily creatures, meaning our physical flesh restored or perfected, quickened, that they did not commit to the mountaineer of the looming mountain, who proceeded to bring those the earth subjected in that low land, meaning the earth, passage out of the earth, and those of the subjected lowland were carried away. All of this past tense, referring to it already having happened. So, lending the idea of a cyclical nature of earths. And it will come to pass that the exalted Father will be over the earth to adorn everlasting the as yet identified home from early betimes, meaning like ancient times, so from before, and to portion and shoulder responsibility for adorning perpetually the as yet established strong ram, if you guys are catching on, the as yet established strong ram, the hero, who informs as an archer and teacher to humble the lowland merchants. In other words, those who think they're in charge of the earth will be humbled by the strong ram, who is also an archer and a teacher. In fact, it refers to him that way several times. Behold, Jehovah has shown the exalted Father what is promised to the conceived carnally, that means us born here, the recompense of these same earth-built sons and daughters therein from another built sacrificial altar for Jehovah to appear to. So yet another earth where there's an invasion commanded by Jehovah. And left off they therein from the looming mountain confrontation with those of the ancient time of the East and of the house of God. So this refers to like traditional adherence to the religion and contrasting to those who are just accepting the paradigm. The house of God was spread out as a tent and a shining tabernacle, meaning the same as, under the wings of the eagles of the Father, the sky darkened by it, all those ideas. The mercy seat of God within the house of God had roared westward, having seafaring men, so seafaring not meaning literal oceans, but this actually referring to angels, who will distort into a heap of ruins the eastward ancient time builded place. You may remember that all of Eden is eastward from heaven, and this being the builded place. And those still therein, in other words, those who were alive at that time, that they builded as a sacrificial altar. In fact, when it says sacrificial altar, it's talking about us suffering on the planet, not killing animals, to Jehovah. And they would eventually declare aloud there on the earth the name of conspicuous position. This is echoed later in the New Testament. All who call out to me will be saved. Every tongue will confess, every knee will bend, and all will proclaim the hero referred to in these texts as Jesus Christ. Peace and respect to the four people watching. I appreciate you. And then it will be set forward by the exalted Father that a journey would begin, and he of the name of conspicuous position, then again, the hero, set out to depart. That is, he's like I guess you could say the hinge pin, setting forward to go to the place parched by drought, which is southward. So in the stories, south means like undesirable or harsh place. It's a societal reference. If you're in that part of the world and you go south, you're probably going to die unless you have like really good support systems. So it's talking about going into a place that's very inhospitable. As it continues, and spoiler alert, it's talking about outer space, as was described, that we leave from here toward a certain point in outer space in the recollection of the Garden of Eden, way before this. And it will come to pass that they will be hungry in famine in the earth and sink down before the exalted Father. That is, the signs of end times will cause us to be desperate. Frankly, it's more than coercion. It's people refusing to take the ascension, coming to understand that if they stay, they're gonna die. And you could say something like, that's not very nice. And I've had people say that. And maybe it's not nice. But I'm one of those who believes that the ends justify the means. If the difference is people stay here and are killed off and are forced to worship these satanic beings that would be taking over, and that was allowed to continue on, then they are returning to the slavery, which is so condemned by the text. Not condemned in a typical Christian reading, but in the reading frame I've adopted, condemned continuously, that slavery is bad. It'll come to be passed to be hungry. Where was I? Enclosed, besieged place of limitation. That's literally the word. Egypt means limitation. And after that fearful journey, yeah, that'll be scary for all of us. Alien invasions, not pleasant. They made together, they will abide time therein, and doubtless be voracious in hunger and very grievous in burden in that land. So talking about if you stay, it's going to be tough. And they're purposefully making it tough so that you won't stay, so that you will. It's coercion in no uncertain terms. And it will come to pass when they draw near to go into the enclosed and besieged place of limitation. I want you guys to know that, like, in an idea for idea translation, I didn't have to like change the literal definitions of the words. That this is just the definitions that were the words. And it continues to work, and it builds an entire narrative, and it doesn't change from that narrative at any point. I didn't have to like alter definitions to get this. It's and I know it's a little chunky, and it's big ideas, one right after the other. Peace and respect, Doubting Thomas. Feel free to come in, and I'll stop reading this, and I will speak with you instead. Just wanted you to know that. I will speak a promise to the ruler princess wife. Ruler princess wife meaning the bride who is honored, who is important, like a princess, who will be ruling. That it's talking about us there, that we are those who ascend and are looked at like royalty. Although it's the feminine, but the feminine makes sense when it's talking about a large group of people to that culture at that time. That's how they would have referred to a large group of people, as in the feminine. And that because it's giving us freedom, it's not promising us a whole bunch of rules and oppression and like the idea that Christians profess about us, like strumming harps and praising God constantly, like some kind of used to be aware robot. It's that whole idea is just not here. In fact, it's the opposite. It's talking about our freedoms, and that we are the governing body of ourselves in freedom and being and having knowledge. Behold, I beseech you that you acknowledge doubtlessly, you wife, that means you guys listening right now, beautiful one, he called you beautiful, fairest one in regard of countenance, it will be better for you. because those of the place of besieged limitation will appear to you, wife, beautiful one, fairest one in regard of countenance, as an emerging entity to destroy emerging signs of the quickening alive, emerging signs that you will be quickened alive. That's talking about Satan and his kind being cast to the earth and out of the skies. And they'll be trying to convince you to not take the ascension. That emerging property, like they're going to show up from somewhere else. Speak now, I beseech you, sister, kindred, and testify with intent. There's two spaces there when there shouldn't be. Of good, that which is throughout the cause to be quickened alive and refreshed of flesh, heart, and mind, quickened alive, that you roll away on account, like leave, on account of these things, the invasion by our enemies. And it will come to pass that you behold the carrying away by the exalted Father, or ascension, preventing them from the place of besieged limitation meaning the earth. Those of the place of besieged limitation will hold the bride of the exalted Father, doubtless the same bride who is exceedingly raked together, like well put together, we would say put together, and a firebrand, and a beautiful one. So kind of thinks of us as being kind of spicy. The fairest one in regard of countenance, like we are beautiful to them, and the ruling governor princess, and she will behold the ancient first divider king of a great house. First, you might recognize like a divider king as those that cause divisions between us, things like prejudice, hatred, all those kinds of ideas, which will be seen as an emerging entity. We just went over that, shining and boasting against the taking away. See, that's what I just said. They'll be trying to convince us not to take the ascension, the taking away of the wife bride, meaning us, the taking of her away to build and establish a continuation of the temple house of Jehovah. So that is, we become the temple, and we've gone over that before. The exalted Father will be made glad. The exalted Father will be pleased to pass over. We're going to expand on the idea of Passover later on in the text. And bring away think about Passover, the way Christians use the word Passover, and it's this like one time a year, and it's a big deal, and they have all these ceremonies, and they do weird stuff, even weirder than normal. But the word Passover is the idea that passing over your head is this thing that like blots out the sky and causes a really big shadow, and you'll be in the shadow of it. Is that a misspelling? Yeah, it's a misspelling. Too many P's. The exalted Father will be pleased to pass over and bring away transgressions for the sake of what will come to pass. This is, forget what we did before. It's not going to matter. It will be better for you what he will make come to pass. In other words, us becoming a galactic-based space society is certainly better than us dying with the planet. Peace and respect certainty exists. JG, good to see you. Feel free to come in and tell me why I'm stupid. Where was I? Pass, better come to pass. For you, the migrant flock, there's another way to refer to us, and multitude of inquiring young heifers, troubled, boiling he-asses, worshiping man-slaves, patient, spreading out handmaid slaves, and the well-recompensed mute beast of burden camels. So this is one of the first times throughout the Old Testament that it refers to us as beasts of burden, as being enslaved, and why I mean, in the King James, this just comes out ass instead of troubled, boiling he ass, which this is talking about, people who are stubborn and upset. Beasts of burden, mute beasts of burden, meaning like people who are quiet and, they pull their weight, stuff like that. So you can see that this is anthropomorphization of animals and slaves, referring to us as a people here now because we have no real freedoms. I will touch and bring down, said Jehovah, a plague on the ancient first divider king, that being Satan, of that great house, that emerging entity you saw, which at the time this would be will see, but this is all past tense because it's already happened somewhere else, who built a prison temple. Like this prison temple right here, this is referring to religions we have today and all the bad ideas that we have, and that it's imprisoning and it causes us prejudice and hatred and othering and, all the stuff that it actually causes. I will bring him down with a great and mighty smite for the governor princess. In other words, to benefit you, the one who makes divisions among you, which caused you to think a certain way that's wrong, will be brought down for you. And who are you? You are the exalted Father's wife. Therefore, proclaim, will say the ancient first divider king of that great house. Okay, remember, this is Satan speaking here. Cry out what the exalted Father has promised. Like, tell me about this promise. What kind of thing has made the one deal as such with me? He's like saying, why am I guilty? Be obvious and make known what is not conspicuous and is because of this same existent common woman bride. So he just like downed you. He called you a commoner when, like, they're saying you're a princess and you're the important thing here and you're beautiful. No. You're common. Whereby it is spoken, they are my sister to carry away as an emergent entity, and mine wife to marry. From this time forth, behold my wife, and I will carry her away and depart from here. So obviously leaving the earth, ascension, and this is in reference to challenging the angels. The angels saying we have a righteous claim to the people of this planet. He's like saying, yeah, what's this righteous claim? Like these aren't even special. These are common. Then spoke the ancient first divider king, again, that's Satan, advise mankind against reaching out to this emerging entity who is stretching out its hand toward the bride. This is, let's see, where is it? Emerging entity, there it is. Emerging entity. This is in reference to those who came out of somewhere else and are obvious to the people, making a claim, putting out their hand toward the bride, that being you, which are the growing people. Counsel absolutely every of them. That means let it be known to all the people that this is a false claim. Well, you can go a step deeper and say, well, what if Satan is the righteous one here and the angels don't have a claim to us? I think that's going to be pretty shallow at the time, because we would have already met angels, because this is before the war in the heavens. And we'll have already made up our mind if they're friendly or, if they're liars or what's going on. I think there'll even be some, because this is speaking to a certain individual who's going to go and like inform everybody, right? Like, I'm being treated unfairly. Go and announce to them that this ain't right. Let them all know, right? So evidently he's speaking to his prophet, the one who's going to announce all this. Go and inform them. Peace and respect, Christian Carpenter. Good evening. Hope everyone's having a good night. So far, so good. What do you think of this, Christian Carpenter? I mean, in an idea for idea translation, this is going on and on about Satan invading the earth and trying to trick us through his prophet. And it's Genesis 13. I mean, it's early. Peace and respect, Metabun. Where was I? Here we go. The emerging people and Jehovah's destroyers. Yes, angels act as destroyers. And yes, universally through many stories. Go look at the life of Michael. It will be shown by the exalted Father that the ascension offered is against the limitations of that same princess wife bride. That is, when you ascend, you get freedoms, not more rules. And that absolutely every one of them, not of the enveloping covering, meaning the invasion of end time, that is end times, heaven in the sky, will grow dark in the evil parched land southward. That is, you're going to die in space. Thus the exalted Father raked together the firebrands, that's you guys, who are a weightily redeemed flock. Yeah, you recognize that kind of language. That yearned for silver and shimmering gold, like materialism, in the departing journey away from the evil parched land southward by the as yet revealed house of God. That is the habitation of God, which is hidden. So this is like admitting divine hiddenness right here. The house of God, even as the established home for them, that is, you're going to live there, a shining tabernacle, that is brand new, that arrives and will begin opening for the first time among them and is called the house of God. The house of God stands between them and a heap of ruins. That is, it's to prevent you from experiencing everything being a heap of ruins, which they do announce that they intend to destroy the planet. Sorry, JWs. Sorry, Mormons. You have misunderstood the plan here. Coffee. And the before established home, which is a sacrificial altar, and i.e. earth, which is why an altar has to be built of earth, where they kept time therein. Yep, we've been here, 200,000 years or whatever, since the chief beginning aforetime, and until the accosted encounter, which proclaims time therein, is finished in the name of the one of conspicuous position, the hero Jesus, who is Jehovah. That is, he is the representation of Jehovah. Moreover, the enveloping covering, again, comes with the exalted Father, and it will come to pass and be better for you, migrating flock and inquiring herd. Okay, we get a lot of pet names. In the shining tabernacle, not of the firm earth, and you will all be carried away as the emerging entity to inhabit united together. That is, new heaven, and we get it. So we'll all be of the same heaven, except those who feel they weren't saved by Jesus. They may go to a different heaven, or the last heaven described. Doubtlessly, your gathered substance had become manifold, great, and you could not inhabit and unite together on the earth. This is talking about like a population problem. We become so many that we can't get along on the earth. Now that's quite a prophecy to be written Old Testament. It will come to pass that contention and controversy will grow among herdsmen, shepherds. This is like political leaders. Of those who will be redeemed possession of the exalted Father, a herd of redeemed possession bought by the enveloping covering. In other words, you're not purchased yet. You are purchased by the enveloping covering, which is completely reasonable. There's nothing wrong with people asking for like actual evidence to a thing. And this says how you're bought. That is, you're persuaded, convinced by the events. Between the subjecting merchant traffickers, that's people who are in charge of you now, like business people, whoever you work for, of the lowlands and insult. It's not just saying like low in elevation, but like low in mentality, low in perspective, low in morality, those kinds of ideas. And those belonging to an undecided, unwalled city. That's interesting. It's like saying you're not protected. And the controversy did tarry at that time in the firm earth. This is talking about, again, so this is like summating what was just shown. Those who ascend easily, those who have difficulty ascending, and that will be controversial. And for those who are involved in the controversy, that is, that don't accept the new paradigm, will stay. That's what the word tarry right there means. It means you'll stay on the earth. By the way, it's suggesting against that. And spoke the exalted Father. So from heaven, the one conducting end times, that kind of Father, I will command within the enveloping covering, when it will come to pass, there will be no contention and controversy. I beseech you, between you and I, between you and the sheep, or between herdsmen, shepherds, and among other herdsmen, shepherds, because we all ourselves are to the emerging entity kindred. So we're all related, especially in the eyes of the adversary, and we're not going to have herdsmen, shepherds arguing with each other. That's going to stop. Which I imagine in ancient religions there was already that, so it's not really indicative of some foreknowledge. But we definitely know there's how many different divisions of Christianity. Harple Blues, I'm not for sale. Peace and respect, Harple Blues. It's not really purchasing like you're for sale. It's more like redeeming your present debt that you think you belong here. Something like that. Will not the firm earth, absolutely everyone, regard this in sight? If you had 29 evenly spaced moon-sized objects around the earth, there'd be no position, I believe, especially if they were centralized on land masses, there'd be no position on any landmass from which you couldn't see one. So yes, people will see it with their eyeballs and stuff. Those in the firm earth scattered abroad, I will beseech you throughout, when the thinly veiling fitted covering is on the left hand, choose the right. And when the thinly veiling fitted covering is on the right hand, to choose the left. Now you read that in the King James and it's just like, what the hell are you talking about? But saying it's thinly veiled is like saying it's barely hidden. So what it's claiming is that it'll be easy to discern that angels are of our type of animal, and the adversary is different from us, and they're not going to be able to hide that very well, and it should be obvious to you in the moment. I will bear you up and carry you away in the enveloping covering. You will lift up your eyes and mentally and spiritually understand absolutely every whirling dance of religions. It calls religions whirling dances. Isn't that interesting? It's like, dizzying and crazy and maybe even disorganized. I agree. In the circle of the lands, when I come down as the descender to the doubtlessly well-watered fat pastures, and those who are of well-watered fat pastures, absolutely every one of them will see and understand Jehovah's destroyers burning the precisely bound sheaves of chaff still submersed in the defended garden. So it is claiming there is a percentage of people who will not get this, and they're going to burn up with the earth. Now, that's not the same as damnation, despite Christian assertions to the same, but is talking about the destruction of flesh from off the earth for sure. That is to say, flesh burnt on the altar is pleasing to God. There's a large concept that's obvious from within the text. Burning precise ashes, still submerged in the defended garden, Jehovah's firm earth of limitation, and those that are not carried shall be small and insignificant. So a very small percentage. Of course, that'll be real people that other people know. And that will not be without heartache. There will be appointed mature men, elected for the enveloped. Mature men here meaning completely mature. So not like us. Elected for the enveloping covering, that is to run the series, what we call sometimes end times. Chosen mature men, elected to enter absolutely every part of the circle plane place, like you've heard circle of the earth. The descender's journey to the enveloping covering was a journey of an ancient mountain eastward to, that should be capitalized, oversight, to divide the extant immature men beyond their brethren kindred who descended. So yes, they are dividers. In what way? People will be quote unquote measured for sin, and that differentiates between the two. And then of course you're more than welcome through your own exercise of whatever will you have to refuse heaven on its arrival. Peace and respect, Saint Tommy. The exalted Father tarried over them the firm earth of merchant traffickers of the lowland during the enveloping covering, and tarried over that guarded city of excitement and anguish, alien invasion, exciting and anguish. Yeah, that makes sense. And round plain land, which is a shining temporary tabernacle, claiming it's not our permanent home, until the scorching burning of it was complete. That is, they don't leave till the planet's destroyed. Of course, they claim to recover 7 mountain-sized amounts of metal. I don't know how big a mountain is, but meaning like a lot of metal, and it names the metals later on in the text that will be recovered from this planet. So it makes sense to me that they would burn it. They would allow it to melt, because that's just an easy way to sort metals. And all the stuff that we've used for construction and copper wire going over long straight stretches of land, straight over long stretches of land. Pretty easy to recover if you just melt the whole place. And the extant immature men, scorching and burning, will be evil, and gone wrong sinners to Jehovah, for they will be poorly raked together firebrands, where it just called you guys well raked together, and exceedingly evil, so unusual, and not organized in thought, not accepting what they actually experience. Jehovah promised to the exalted Father, in other words, there's mandates from the set of ideals that people who are doing the job of the set of ideals must follow. Following afterward from the judgment gathering of the scattered abroad during the enveloping covering, the following thing: those who remain divided and scattered abroad from you will grow dark against the bearing up, carrying away, or ascension. I beseech you to behold and consider between the established homes. Look at the earth and look at heaven. You males there in the earth, between the stored up hidden treasures northward. Remember, south was bad, north is good. Between the parched evil waiting southward, and the hidden and delayed place of ancient time eastward, you roaring seafaring men westward. So this is a reference to us on the earth. I don't know if you guys, if that didn't make sense to you, write what the hell or something in the side chat, and I'll try to go over it. That was 13:14. Yeah, 13:14. I think it was maybe just a little complex. Doubtlessly, absolutely everyone in the firm earth, they that you male perceive, behold, will I deliver to you from the carnally sown seed, even to the secret thing will I give you perpetually. Secret thing, meaning, again, we got divine hiddenness. We don't see heaven. So right now it's a secret thing. And it will be yours forever. I also ordain and appoint your carnally sown seed, children, of your pulverized dust, DNA, to be in the firm earth. That is, in the future, you will seed in earth. They will be therein when existent men will be able to tell the count of the pulverized dust upon the earth, be able to number the total people, which we have done. The number of the appointed carnally sown seed will again be counted. There you go. Rise up and walk the firm earth. For the length and the breadth of it, doubtlessly, I will deliver to you. Shining temporary tabernacles are established for the exalted Father. A shining temporary tabernacle was established, and a shining temporary tabernacle was removed and carried away to dwell with the mighty rams. This is another nickname for angels. Of the tree of life, meaning they live forever. Having vigor, no kidding, and fatness. They unite, that means like extra health. They unite in enchanted association to establish and maintain for whatever time they're in sacrificial altars to Jehovah. That means the earth lasts for a while, and then that time is over, and that's the end of it. What say you, side chat humans? I mean, is this making sense to you, or is it too chunky? I mean, it's kind of poetic. I don't want you guys to be like, what the hell did that say? The hard part is, even though you go idea for idea, it still takes a lot of study and explanation and understanding of, the way it's using words. So it's still not easy. I guess I should extend more forgiveness to those who did translations and why they came up with what they did in the pre-existent ideas, presuppositions of Christianity. So it's not simple. Did you guys know that the Lion King is in the Bible? Huh? Check if anybody's backstage. Nobody's backstage. You guys coming in or what? The Sayer of Darkness and the Lion-like Sun. In the Genesis 14, they named these parts War of the Kings, which is, they got the right general overall idea, but they don't know which kings and why they're warring, and they think it's like historicity of the Jews, or made up history to justify the Jews, or whatever they think. It will come to pass in the day of the fall of the Sayer of Darkness. Like, how did they miss that? That the king of the land of two rivers, so that's up there, out there, will beget, or father, a lion-like king. Don't need two spaces there. Whom the Father is the chastener of. You remember elsewhere in the text it says, the good Father chastens the Son. If I chasten you, you are the good Son. It means I love you. I'm correcting you. I'm trying to fix your brain. And there will be another, who is the hand full of stolen sheaves king. Stolen sheaves, meaning like the product, meaning us. So stolen sheaves is those of us who get stolen, like unrighteously taken away. The handful of stolen sheaves king, and he will be protecting for an eternity after the shrinking and crawling back of the Sayer of Darkness, terrible great son, his son, the king of the Gentile Goy. That is, if you remain Gentile Goy, you are of the beast of Satan and Satan. There you go. And the lion-like king. Oh, by the way, lion right here is like, it's an animal that will kill you. It's dangerous. It's, big and strong, and it makes a lot of noise. will perform fighting war against the son of evil, the king of scorching and burning, and seek a quarrel against him of condemned wickedness with iniquity, who is the king of stolen sheaves of submersion and drowning. He is the splendor of the new Father King, and the husbandman to the red earth, and the name of conspicuous position of those of winged lofty flight, and king of the glorious roebucks, king who swallowed up in devouring destruction the same who grew insignificant. So that's talking about the conduction of end times and how there will be a small percentage of people who do not accept what's going on, and that he fights with this unrighteous king of wickedness. Absolutely every of these bind together throughout the profound valley of the spread out wilderness plain, which includes your earth. Those same tear away those easily pulverized and dissolved like salt, and are the roaring seafaring men who repeat again by the authority of Jehovah. They will lack loyalty to Jehovah during the year of the rebellious slave worshippers, that handful of stolen sheaves, and our lawlessness, lacking loyalty to Jehovah, and will be found in physical disorder during judgment in the change causing year that they rebel. You guys should come in because people are starting to lose interest. I think this has gone on too long. In the midst of the spiritually perfecting from disorder through judgment year enters the one with a handful of stolen sheaves, king of them contracting in anguish, to seek a quarrel and strike at the invigorating giants, and pretend to be a rich flock from a star of two horns. Pretending to be a rich flock hailed by the star with two horns that appeared as a sign of the arrival, but not of roving creatures sunburnt in countenance, using the appearing sign, but of dreadful terrors, who come making the illusion of a level plain beam flooring foundation for the two different cities. There's a lot of cultural reference right there. It's like saying a level floor, which is a reference to saying, oh, all things are equal, everything's right here, this is the way it should be. Ideas like that. And he uses the star of two horns, or the big star in the sky. That is the sign of the coming, the star in the east. He's going to use that as proof that he's the right guy and that everything's fine. The emerging entity will have been boring caves and be dwellers in looming mountains with bristled, unkempt hair due to the hand of adorned mighty rams, and will dwell in the places of caverns for fear of the hand of the adorned mighty rams. In caverns will they hide, for the keeping of the signs of the coming of the promise to the wilderness. So here we are back at the Garden of Eden, meaning the earth. Adam and Eve hiding from God. That is, we're going to be unkept. Our hair is going to be messed up. And this goes on and on throughout the text, talking about like us shaving our head, probably because of lice. And that we will stink instead of having perfume and bangles. You remember all that probably if you've studied the text. And the rams will return and come into the sight and into the mental and spiritual faculties of those of lawful judgment, and those of sight of the foundation of mental and spiritual faculties of lawful judgment. That the same that make sanctified and make holy the temple prostitute. That's referring to us, those of us who are right now, I don't know, whores for materialism. And slay absolutely every one of the spread out field wilderness people of lapping dwelling in a valley. And the rams are indeed publicity sayers that tarry and remain to inhabit and judge those erect with palms showing. That is, standing as Christ crucified with palms in your hands. That is, your fingers extended. They are to judge you. That is to say, a physical measurement to make sure you're not some kind of freak. And will go forth, the king of scorching and burning, the king of sheaves of submission, but the king husbandman of the blood-dyed red earth, king of the glorious roebucks, the king of the destroying, devouring destruction, and that same destroyed are small and insignificant. He will arrange the overcoming in war of those of the profound valley lowlands spread throughout the wilderness. Man, I left a lot of two spaces. How did I do that so often? The profound valley and a lowland spread out is the wilderness of contracting and anguish. That is, we suffer here. Yes, that is true. Him of those contracting in anguish, having a handful of stolen sheaves, and the king of the secret thing from eternity, with a terrible great son, who is king of the Gentile Goy, and the sayer of darkness, but the king of the country of two rivers, the king having a lion-like son, king to whom Jehovah is his chastener, will be upon the foursquare creation. That is, Jesus arrives. These are the kings of those contracting in anguish and given grace in the profound valley, which is a spread out plain. So there's the contest right there. You got the good guy, you got the bad guy, you got us in the middle. So we're kind of pawns in a major chess game. And those of the profound valley and spread out plain from wellspring pits, who boiled up with slime from those pits, will flee away from the king of scorching burning and stolen sheaves of submersion. They will flee away from those cast down therein and leave them behind by escaping into the looming mountain. That is, to get away from Satan and his kind, you have to go to heaven. Because if you stay, you don't get away from them. And will take away absolutely everything of the gathered riches from the king of scorched burning and stolen sheaves of submersion. The emerging entity will have taken absolutely every kind of victual foods and will have departed. Foods and supplies. That right there is again going on to Noah's ark. 4 of the unclean, 4 pair of the 4 and 14 of the. Well, I got all mixed up there. 4 of the unclean and 14 of the clean of each thing, plus the mountains of metal, of course, and all that goes into heaven. They will be fetched to be married in the enveloping covering that during spacecraft in the sky is when we're brought up off of the earth and attend the wedding ceremony where they swear to us and we swear to them allegiance, a singular purpose. And the brethren angels and the family building block sons and daughters, the same will tarry and behold the scorching burning of the place of the emerging entities to gather the riches before the departing. I just talked about this, melting the earth to get everything off of it. Is vigor misspelled there? There you go. There will become a refugee declaring the message of the exalted Father, a man of the region beyond, who temporarily dwelt with the mighty rams of the great tree, having vigor and fatness, a publicity sayer and a kindred to the stones who gather like clusters of grapes. And he will be brethren to the immature men who rustle their mane like young lions when it roars without meaning. The same will be husband and ruler over the dividing covenant of the exalted Father. Guys, if you don't think that's an Old Testament description of Christ, I don't know where else you're going to admit that it is. Listen to the exalted Father and obey that brother who takes captive and makes empty the earth. He is dedicated and trained by those begat homeborn, and a son to build up my house in harmony and of God's elect. That's right, God's elect means Christ. Bringing harmony out of the bondage and making disorder into judgment. Following after the persecution, he will be adorned in perpetuity, even to hear, please, and judge. Please, like crying out, or problems. He is apportioned to the. Oh, yeah, I should go over that. Dear Christians, Christ will be judging in heaven, not you. He is a portion to the beyond, and that same worshiper slave is like a winding staircase at night, so as to slay and to follow after, even into their entry into the cherished hiding place. They of the thinly veiling garment are from the left hand, and silent is the sackcloth weaver. So it's talking about him who designed the thin veil that covers the wrong hand. He doesn't admit that he's the one that made all the crap up. So we're talking about an adversary and a liar there. And I will restore back absolutely everything of the gathered riches, even to the return, the kindred in the enveloping covering, the gathered riches, even the bride wife, known as the emerging entity, and the dim people. Dim as in not enlightened, not dim like you're not smart. It's not trying to insult you. It's just saying we don't know everything. And will come the king of the scorching and burning, proceeding hostile against, and to hinder the restoration, and smite, using him of a handful of stolen sheaves. The emerging entity king of those together and contracting in anguish will be moving them away from the profound valley lowland, that equal level plain. That same is king of the profound valley lowland and the king of righteousness. Come on, Christians. If it says he's the king of righteousness and king of peace. This got translated into Melchizedek, king of Salem. Because they didn't translate all the words. They just missed some of the words. I don't know why. And king of peace will proceed to devour the showbread and the effervescent wine. That same one will be the meat-eating officer priest of God, raised by the Most High God. Blessed to speak promises of blessings from the exalted Father, a prominent ram and a mighty one who ascends to the Most High, a prominent ram and a bought possession. The whole idea of being a bought possession is that you needed purchased, that you were messed up before. And this is obviously talking about Christ. Christ is a bought possession, then Christ was messed up and needed purchased. Of the lofty heaven from the lowly firm earth. Sorry, all you sinless perfectionist life Christs guys. He needed redeemed. He is blessed by the Most High Mighty One. He and will be surrounded by the shield and buckler and delivered up by the deliverer, bound and made straight and like flint against the enemy, and the hand and the strength of Jehovah to receive a 10th part of absolutely everything. Boy, they left that out of the King James. A 10th part. I have spoken over the king of scorching and burning, and promised that I am against him, and will deliver recompense. I, which refresh flesh. Why Christians think there's only spirits in heaven, I don't know. And gathered and emplaced the riches, I also carry them away. And spoke the exalted Father, I have promised against the king of scorching and burning, and therefore will I rise up and exalt my right hand on account of Jehovah the Most. See, this is the Father speaking and saying there's a difference between him and Jehovah, but he raises the Son up. A prominent ram and a mighty one, a redeemed possession of the lofty heaven and from the firm earth. Again, he is redeemed. No threaded cord will go as far as to entangle your sandal lachettes, or lock your gifted sandals, or either make you fail to take away any of absolutely every of them. Only do not speak. I enrich the exalted Father who enriches. Except altogether those young lions whelp men. You slay of sword, and divide from existent men. Those will come near my young servant, and cluster like grapes, in vigor and fatness. Fetch them that they may walk in vigor and fatness in your apportioned share, your part of heaven. So this is like directly talking to the Christ. No problem yet because it's Old Testament. It doesn't create a time problem for most Christians that Jesus should have the Old Testament. But it never stops doing this, even throughout all of the New Testament. After that same ancient promised to Jehovah, it will come to pass and be better for you, when the presented with the exalted Father and see the ecstatic vision commanding reverent fear, that is the invasion. Let not the exalted Father, for which I am a covering shield, hire you with only an exceedingly great reward. Speak, exalted Father, speak, Lord Jehovah, of what kind is apportioned for I? So here we're like quoting Jesus, Old Testament. I, which have walked the earth and was kept bare and childless. That's right. Of family building block sons for my acquired house by the same God who is a helper. Silent is the sackcloth weaver. Speak, exalted Father, speak. Behold, I am bestowed not any carnal seed, though you behold as I recompensed family building block sons to your house, and you take possession of that emerging entity as inheritance. Behold, the promise of Jehovah toward you has been spoken. Thus, this possession is not your possession doubtlessly, but when those that come out and they exit due to your soft heart, that same is your inheritance. There we go with the 10th. Those who stay behind and Jesus convinces go to his heaven. Others do not. They go to the Father's heaven. Proceed to the emerging entity. Proceed to those severed abroad and say to them, look and consider, I beseech you, toward the lofty heavens and count the rolling, shining, blazing stars of the Messiah and of God's declared knowing. Surely if you endure and declare to the emerging entity my promise spoken aforetime in this manner, the same shall come to pass and will happen with you. Confirm Jehovah and esteem his judgment to be justified within righteousness, and I promised toward mine Jehovah, they will come out by an enlightening glorious flame from the clod breakers. Us on the earth were clod breakers. To give them this one here of several firm lands in sight of the wilderness to take possession of. Speak a promise, ruling God Jehovah. What knowledge will I doubtlessly possess and inherit? So before it's like, what people do I get? It's like, now what will I know? And he promised unto him that needed to take hold and take to wife from mine which is upon the revolving round, the young heifers in the third part, the strong female goats in the third part, the prominent rams in the third part, and the difficult of the circle border turtle doves, and plunder the nestling pigeons. He will lay hold of and take to wife for himself absolutely every of those divided in two from the emerging entity, in between the two of them, to set up existent men, cut in two, to encounter and meet their friends, fellows, companions, shepherds of the emerging entity. That's like leadership. But the early departed birds will be divided not. That is, those who go to heaven early will not hear the testimony of Christ, and were saved by their already existent belief in the Father. Then will descend screaming, ravenous birds. Well, if that sounds a little bit scary and offensive, it's supposed to. And they will come marching down upon the exhausted bodies, but the exalted Father will blow mightily and disperse them away from the emerging and drive them away. In other words, you'll have to volunteer to contact those screaming, ravenous birds. You'll have to stay behind. And it will come to pass that the brilliant sun will be caused to go into a trance. That's the darkened sun further in the text. And be cast down throughout what the exalted Father beheld. A dreadful terror of black darkness will magnify great in hiding, and will be cast down throughout the earth. This may just be a reading and nothing else. You guys are not interested in coming into the stream, which is okay with me. Although I'd rather have conversations about this. The promise of the exalted Father is knowledge with understanding, doubtlessly. Nevertheless, your carnal seed will exist as a foreigner with conceded rights in a firm land not their own, and as servant worshippers humbling themselves before the emerging angels, and be squared on 4 points, hands and knees, as God's elect for the repeating ages. That is, it's promised to Christ not only that he gets a percentage of the people on the earth, but also that he will seed a new earth and that those people on that earth will suffer. Moreover, the Gentile Goy, they will be worshiper slaves to the strong judge Lord. I, which establish, am that strong judge Lord, will tarry after to establish and to fix them. Therefore, come you out of the gathered, and be magnified great, you gathered riches. You, male, enter toward the chief Father in a covenant of peace, and be buried favorable to the higher nature, hoary and gray-headed and of great age, which doesn't mean that they're really aging, but it's like take your position that's going to last a very, very long time. Moreover, the Gentile Goy, they will be worshiper slaves to the strong judge Lord. I, which am the strong judge Lord, will tarry afterward to establish thusly the gone out gathered possessions, and magnify great the gathered possessions. It will come to pass, and be better for you. Have you caught on that this is a promise to Jesus? That when the brilliant sun goes into thick darkness, and it will happen that the thick darkness is seen as surprising, that a glistening furnace will have produced a wrathful smoke, a glistening furnace shining like a torch, a glistening furnace with a shining torch of fire, a shining torch they passed over and did not understand. From among these promises by those who were divided apart, this is some of the verses that I think is talking about a super volcano. In that hot day, that same hot day, Jehovah cut out a separating covenant to meet the contracting and anguish with the exalted Father, saying, your sown seed is to establish this one heaven here as a firm land, and they will flow together as a radiant river. This is, I look forward to the day that we're all great friends. Those in limitation will come to flow together as a radiant river, great and flowing together as a radiant river, magnified great and flowing together, a radiant river breaking forth in fruitfulness. Your acquired possession of the emerging entity, those haunted by you of the emerging entity, will be faced with the ancient Easterners. Get that? The emerging entity will be dismayed in terror. The emerging entity living separated as an unwalled village of ruler dwellers. So that's like we are our own governors, but we're unprotected, unwalled. The emerging entity will encounter the invigorating giants that make them healthful. That is, angels are bigger than we are. The emerging entity will encounter the prominent sayer, Christ, one of the emerging entity who will be lowly and humble himself and a zealous merchant of truth. For the emerging entity dwelling on a clayey soil, and some of the emerging entity will be trampled down in the threshing place. I think I should stop right there. If anyone's interested in coming in, the links in the top of the side chat. Oh, that's really good timing. Peace and respect. Faisal, how are you?
I am doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm better than I deserve. Content and stuff.
Then you deserve to be better.
No, I don't think. Well, first, I know that I don't deserve to be better. And second, I don't know how it could get better. I mean, here I am talking to you online in a first world country, in a major city, in the downtown historic district, pretty darn good.
Well, if you think about only this world, then definitely there's probably nothing better. But if
Oh
you
yeah. Well, I'm
keep
not talking
the,
about heaven at all.
yeah, so definitely, hopefully,
It,
and I do pray for you in that sense.
very good. Thank you very much. I pray for you as well. What do you? I mean, it doesn't speak much about it. It just says more than you can imagine. You know, what is heaven?
It is, it is definitely more than what you can imagine. Because I mean,
Yeah, but that
here's the
that
thing:
doesn't tell me anything.
it doesn't tell you anything. So let's say, okay, um, the fact of the matter is when you think about some of these concepts, right? You have to end with a point where your imagination is restricted to, right? So think of it this way. In one of the description in heavens is that we will be given fruits and we will be given um, other delicacies to
Hmm.
enjoy, which we have we cannot imagine, right? Essentially, what that means is it would be, for example, it would be like apple, but it won't be an apple, right? Because all the apples that you know and understand of this world, the concept of apple, or you know how I think it was Plato, the essence or the form would be of an
Yeah.
apple, but when you would taste it, it would be beyond anything which you would be able to ascribe to an apple, right?
You know, that would be fine as long as I could say something like there are different kinds of premium apple. Like
Yeah.
there's a best sweet apple, there's a best sour apple, there's a best crunchy apple. If it couldn't be all of those things and soft apple, it couldn't be all of those things combined in one apple. You know, so
No, so
I think
whenever
that would
you
be
put,
fine as long as there's still variety. It would still make sense.
there will definitely be a variety. I mean, when we talk about it, right, some of the ways that um, the the scholars have understood this is that, for example, you take first bite, it would be different from the second bite, it would be different from the third bite. That you would
Oh,
never,
is that what they think it's going to be? It's each bite of the same apple would be different.
each bite would be different, and each bite would be
Okay.
unique. You would never be, how should I put it? You would always be satisfied, but you would never stop being amazed. I hope so.
That sounds really good. But I still think there's going to be different apples. Not every bite of the same apple would be different. That'd be just too weird. Like I'd never know what to expect. Here I am having a nice dish of spaghetti, and it's pesto. No, it's a cheese sauce. No, it's a what the hell? Yeah.
No, 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 no. That's not at all what they mean. So you would
Oh,
know
okay.
it is an apple. You know what to expect, sort of, but it will be better than what you expect, right? So
That that seems like I don't know. That would be okay. Um, what is your answer to ox if you have one? How is there a description when no living man has seen it? Referring to heaven, of course.
how is there a description when no living man has seen it? So
Hmm.
actually, no living man, not only have they not seen it, right? It's hard to describe something which no living being that we know of can imagine itself, right? So it goes beyond that. So um, for me, the way I think about this is that, and I can only talk about this experience from a very uh, sort of personal perspective,
Hmm.
and because it's a hard one to explain, right? When you talk about something like heaven or hell or these extremes of um, like it's the extreme pleasure, the extreme pain in one way of looking at it, right? So one of the things I think about it is that when you think of life, right, the only way sort of you can make sense of life is through the pleasure and pain that you go through, right? Life is worth living because of the pleasure. It's um, you and the pain is what keeps things real as well, right? So those two things are the ones that keep you grounded that this is real. Okay. Now,
I'd go so
when
far
it
as to say both do both, but okay.
yeah. Now, when it comes to heaven and hell, right? This what we've got in this life is sort of a taste of what is to come, right? Without having tasted both the pain and the pleasure, you won't be able to actually make a choice that do I go for pain, do I go for pleasure? Everyone you would think would want pain, you would not want pain, would want pleasure in heaven, right? And the way it's
Maybe.
described is so think of it this way. So, what is pleasurable to a poor person, right, is completely different from what is pleasurable to a rich person. A person who's a multimillionaire, right, he would find pleasure in something completely different from a person
Really?
who's so poor, because let's put it in perspective. He would always be fed. He would always be able to eat and afford what he wants, right? He wants to go somewhere, he would be able to get there, right?
Okay, I'll go
So,
with it.
but for a poor person, some of these basic necessities, if you just go ahead and fulfill them for them, right? That is an experience of pleasure for them, right?
Okay.
So it's a matter of perspective. For a person who's poor all his life, it's very hard for them to fully understand what it means to live a life of riches,
I
right?
suppose, yeah.
And you put it the other way. For a person who's gone through hell on earth, let's say they've gone through a war, they've seen their mom or dad die in front of their eyes, right?
Hmm.
Gone through all of these things. Uh, Someone who's not been through that, it's almost impossible for them to sort of imagine what it would be. Even if you try to explain it to them, if you try to explain to kid that your mom or your dad, they're going to pass away in front of you, this is going to happen, that they would be unable to comprehend it,
Fair enough.
right? And now we're talking about extremes. We're talking about this as an infinity pretty much. When I say that every bite would have a different taste or everything would be at that level, what it means is really that the pleasure you would derive from something. You know how the in economics we have the idea of what is that called? Uh, that once you've attained something, the next time you do um, the law of diminishing
Expectation?
returns. The law of
Okay.
diminishing returns, right?
Diminishing returns. Okay.
There's no diminishing returns in heaven, right? That's the idea of heaven.
Now, I don't doubt these things are true.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But I'm having trouble saying that I can justify it from somewhere aside from Quran.
True. Aside, but again, when you talk about God, when you talk about the ultimate pleasure, when you talk about the ultimate pain, right? The word ultimate or the word infinite or the word these imply the very same concept that I'm trying to describe here,
Yes, of course.
right?
I
Because
mean, I get it. But I also don't think that it literally
you get it, but you don't
has
get it.
to that it literally has to be what the examples are given. But I think they're examples trying to make
They're
us
examples,
understand
yes.
things we can't
It's
really
to
understand.
make you understand. So, for
Yeah.
example, um, one of the ways beauty is described in so one amazing description of beauty in heaven is that when you would enter heaven, right? You first of all you would be awed by everything around you, and you would
Hmm.
spend years just exploring it, right? And then after a number of years, you would come across your wife. So the way we Muslims believe in is if you're a righteous husband and a righteous wife, and you're together in this on this earth, you would be together in heaven, right? And the description of that
Okay.
meeting is that you will go there, and when you see your wife, right, her beauty would encapsulate you completely in the sense that you would just stand there just looking at her for 40 years or something along that line, right? Meaning that for a long time, right, all you would be able to do was be just to take in the beauty. You would be spending all that time just to take in that beauty, right? Sort of being
Well, I hope she
mesmerized.
takes just as long to, considering how handsome you are.
Yeah, definitely. So, but the point is that these descriptions of something that is almost indescribable to the degree it would be on, right?
Hmm.
It's hard to for a human mind to comprehend. So one of the other ways you look at it is that it's hard for the human mind to comprehend the full scale of this universe, right?
Sure.
And we're talking about an entity, right? God being beyond this and m- like more powerful than this, having created multiple universes, multiple worlds, multiple existences, right? So it's almost impossible to comprehend. It's there are ways through analogies that you can actually uh, describe it to give an example, but the real scale of these things, it's almost impossible to fully comprehend, right? So the way we talk about it, like when we say Allahu Akbar, one of the ways that it is actually translated and explained is that it's not just that God is the greatest, right? Is that whatever you can think about, God is greater than that. That's how we actually see it. So if you can imagine something at a certain level, right? If you can imagine the biggest number, God is beyond that, right? So God's understanding is beyond that. His knowledge is beyond that, right? So it's uh, sort of a concept close to infinity uh, when we think about God, when we think about the pleasure in heaven, the pleasure in hell.
I think it's easy for me to imagine this as literal as in expression of technology, and it's hard for me to imagine it literal as expression of um, like the Apple example.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier for me to imagine it as having having perfected what Apple is to the point that what we have that we call an apple right now is very, very, very dull in comparison. You know?
Yes. So think of it as the what we have on earth, right? And one of the ways the prophet described is that the beauty that we have on earth is just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the beauty from heaven. So the the fruits that we have, the trees, the birds, and the animals, right? They are sort of a representation of, or, or an image of what you would see there, right? And you would see beyond that. Well, you would see animals and fruits and delicacies and creatures and um, structures and whatever else, right? Beyond what you can imagine here, right? This is just a fraction of what we see, and even then, what we have here and what we understand here is just um, a fraction of a true representation of what actually would be there, right? So we do understand that that world is beyond what we see here, right?
Mm.
Each individual would have their own heaven, would have their own garden, sort of speaking. That's one of the other ways that it's described, that it's a garden essentially, because gardens are normally understood to be appealing to humanity, pleasurable,
What
right?
I'm wondering which form of the word garden.
Um, Form of the word garden.
Yeah,
I
like what? Okay, so in some languages, the word garden would include the idea of it having a surrounding wall that protects it and
Oh,
preserves
okay.
it.
No,
Some languages, it wouldn't include that idea.
no. So the like each one of these garden, the smallest of the garden that has been described, the last person to reach heaven would be given a garden that is beyond the seven heavens, right? It's bigger than what we know this universe to be. So each individual, your personal property in that sense is something that at this time and age you cannot comprehend even, right?
Right.
So that's what basically is meant by uh, what we call as heaven, right? So that's your garden. Now walls, walls would put a limit to it, but within your sense, right? It's the concept is that you would be there and you would be in bliss for eternity, right? For
Mm-hmm.
eternity means like it. I don't know about you, but for me that means pretty much forever. You would be able to explore it. You would be able to enjoy it as long as you're um, forever. So it's a little bit of pain in this world. It's a bargain, sort of speaking.
I guess if you look at it that way, that
So
it's
yeah,
like suffering and reward for suffering. I suppose if you look at it that way.
yeah,
There are certain parts of that description that I can see as being like generally appealing, but then for me personally, I don't think it would be appealing in certain aspects of it. Of course, I'm a singular individual. I'm not a mass of people that's trying to explain something to a mass of people.
yeah. No,
Um,
definitely.
it's
What is your concept of
let's say
heaven?
I had a garden which end I could never get to. That would actually piss me off because I'm never going to explore all of my own garden. So actually, that wouldn't be appealing to me. That would be annoying to me. Um, but if it was perceptually that you could never get to the end of it, like say it had a drop screen behind it, and when I look at my actual garden, when I look at perceive it visually, there's no end to it. But if I walk over to that wall, I can touch the screen that looks like there's no end to it. And actually, I only have to take care of this part. I don't have to
Y-
try to tend to an eternal, ever extending, no ending garden. Uh,
you're
that,
not attending to the
for
garden, right?
instance.
You would have attendants attending to the garden. You
Wait,
would
wait. Now I need endless attendance in my garden.
you
What if I
would
don't?
have
I
endless
don't like the
attendants.
way other people do things.
No, but they would work according to your will. So,
Yes, but now they're just slaves, and I don't like slavery.
but these are not slaves. Like, if you do you consider machines that do work for you as slaves?
Well, technically they are, but if they don't have sentience, I don't mind having a slave with no
Okay,
sentience.
so essentially, if something doesn't have a will in one sense, right, you wouldn't consider that as being a slave, correct?
Right.
So
I,
one,
I also don't like machines.
yeah,
I really, I'm not
in
kidding
what
you.
sense?
Like when I
No, no,
go
no.
to a
In
grocery
what sense?
store, if there's a real human who can take
Hmm.
my money, I'm going to go to the real human. I'm not going to use the machine. I don't like the machine.
No, no, no. I understand that concept that machines replacing human. I am not in favor of that as well, right?
Right.
There's even if machines are supposed to help us, right? It needs to be done in a way and at a pace which humanity can keep up with. The well-being of a human being to me is still paramount above the economy that
Yeah, me too.
you're trying to develop, the wealth that you're trying to generate, the output that you're trying to produce or whatever else might be.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you forget that, and that's what Islam teaches you, that no matter what you're doing, right, you need to take care of human beings. There needs to be a guarantee to the um, to certain things. I'm actually forgetting exactly how it's worded in Arabic, but it's uh, it's it's to respect your uh, right to living, right to life, right to your intellect, right to your um, uh, health and well-being. So there's a few things in there that Islamic um, within an Islamic community or within Islamic structure or government, you have to guarantee to every human being that you're ruling on, right? So all of these are part of it, and the fact that what we're talking about here is not the idea of just um, a sentient being that has a will. We're talking about a sentient being without that that will, which has been created for your purpose, right? So like we create machines to do our bidding, to do certain
Mm-hmm.
work for us, to move from point A to point B. You've got a car, right? The car, if
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow it decides I don't want to go there, right? You just replace it with another car. There's a purpose behind the car. Those attendants that we're talking about are there for a very purpose for you, not as slaves
That probably
per
sounds
se.
very appealing to a lot of people. For me, it does not.
Okay, that's
But
okay.
it's not trying to speak to me and what is perfection to me. It's trying to speak to a large audience and portray the idea of what perfection is. And that's two very different things. Because any individual human being can have different perceptions or needs or wants of what it is to them, which is perfection. So I'm kind of kidding around about, well, actually I wouldn't want a huge garden that goes on forever. I wouldn't want people or robots working in my garden because they wouldn't do it to my satisfaction. And if they did it perfectly to my satisfaction, I would find that unsatisfactory because now it's not interesting. You know, and yes, I'm just an impossible bastard. But I say it all tongue in cheek because I know that's not what it's literally trying to say.
Yeah, and Richard, it's true. Like for every human that would be in heaven, their heaven would be catered to them. It's not like your heaven. It's not like off the shelf type thing here, right? There's a general description given, but at the end of the day, what we're talking about is God providing each and every being what they have been searching for,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because otherwise, I mean, if you're not finding the pleasure in that, right,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the goal that you were trying to achieve.
Right.
You
Right.
understand?
I think there would always be um, conflict within the idea of what is perfect as soon as you put human being into the equation. And
Yeah.
it's the same problem that Sam Harris runs into in his description of what would be a utopian society. You
Oh
know,
yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
and Richard, we have to give in to the idea. If we do believe in God, and my concept of God is an all-knowing entity, not an entity that doesn't know, right? It knows every possible scenario that is and can ever be, right? So if today you made a choice A versus choice B, in God's knowledge, He
Mm-hmm.
knows what would happen when you make choice A, He knows what would happen when you make choice B, and whatever number of other choices you make, right? So
Mm-hmm.
God has that pre knowledge already. He already knows all of that, right? So for an entity like that to provide us with what we desire, it's not impossible. It's actually very easy for that entity.
Assuming those parameters, yes.
Yes.
But it does raise questions in my mind, like Is everything boring for God?
I don't know.
Well,
I
could he be
cannot.
surprised?
I don't think so.
Well, if you can't be surprised, you can't be disappointed. But
No.
you also can't be pleased with an outcome of a thing other than it already was the outcome that you saw.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that sounds
So,
just boring as hell.
so the interesting thing is, and this very aspect of this very thing, the idea that we're discussing, has
Hmm.
been talked about in the second chapter of the Quran, right? When God has that interchange with Satan, right, where Satan said some of these um,
Oh, that part.
would
Okay,
be thankless, right?
sure.
God basically said, okay, you can go ahead and do whatever work He wants to do, but there would be these people who you cannot even touch, right? So God knows the outcome. He talks about that, and that was essentially what it was.
I'm gonna address TP Seeker in reference to the Bible in assumed Christianity. But what I want to do for you is to destroy your societal Christian acceptance. That's what I really want to do for people, which is why I call my channel Demolish Doctrine, is because that's what it's all about, is getting rid of these preconceived notions where you have to read a certain thing a certain way, because it's just small-minded, and in some small way it's accepting Christianity, and which you don't want to do anyway. You don't want to accept Christianity. um, okay, so without the assumption that the Garden of Eden is a big setup, right? But if it's consistent within the story of the Bible, it's talking about a time that Adam and Eve, man and woman, meet God in the garden, the earth. So it's talking about heaven arriving to the earth, which is why it happens in the cool of the day. Cool of the day meaning something like very near the end. So if you think of our time on the earth, like man had its day on the earth, and God arrives in the cool of the day, it's near the end of the time of man on the earth, something like that. So it's a rescue plot is what's going on there. Now, of course, heaven arriving to the earth would freak us out, which is why they just learned something new and they hide themselves from the face of God. They hide themselves in the garden. So that what's actually going on there is people are freaked out by heaven. Now, is that eating of knowledge? Well, yeah, actually, it would answer a lot of questions. Like right now, we ask ourselves if we're the only sentience in the universe. We ask ourselves why aliens, if they exist, don't come here. We ask ourselves, that whole line of questioning would just like instantly disappear. We would just have knowledge because of the event. So we're eating of a tree of knowledge, and that's shocking. And then we clothe ourselves poorly. I don't know what you know about fig leaves. I looked up, and my memory is not perfect, but from what I can understand, it's like split into like fingers, and it's curled where the smooth side is getting covered up by the curl of the leaf, and then the back side of it is covered in spiny hairs. So imagine making yourself an apron out of something split into fingers, curled, and having spiny hairs on the backside. It's bad clothing. And then in the story, of course, he provides good clothing, which is wool and leather. So warm and durable and reusable and comfortable and soft, all the nice stuff. So it's the idea of them misunderstanding and then God having to correct them. Fig leaves versus leathered skirts. So that's the idea right there. Which is why immediately it's the angels say they have become as us, as angels, knowing good and evil, because they know it. And now all they need to do is put out their hand and accept eternal life. So they're said, look, they grew up. let's give them eternal life as well. Well, there's nothing bad about that. There's nothing about that where Adam and Eve did something wrong. All that's Christian assumptions, and actually goes quite a way, if you would recall it, Faisal, of the story of the Garden of Eden concerning Adam and Eve in Quran.
Yeah, it's there's slight differences in the Quran versus the Bible, definitely,
Yes.
right? One of the most important piece, and this is the story of Adam and Eve has been discussed multiple times in the Quran.
Yes.
The first one being in chapter 2, which I hope you remember somewhat, that God has this interchange with the angels, and he talks about, he basically informs them that he's sending a Khalifa, a representative, to on Earth. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to respond to that?
No, no, no. You're in the
Okay.
middle of something. Please go ahead.
So the fact that God's going, the intent of creating Adam was to send Adam on Earth. And the way we Muslims understand it is that the the idea that Adam was able to make a choice, that was the intent behind creating human beings, as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to other creation like the angels. The angels don't make choices. The angels do what God has informed them to do. They're like, in other words, they may be sentient, but they're not essentially um, they're not beings that have free will or free choice. They do what God has commanded them to do, right? So human beings were created with the ability to choose, and God uh, gave us a rank above the angels. And when you think about it, the idea was that God told the other creation to bow down to Adam, and there was both a um, test in that for the other creation, and at the
Mm-hmm.
same time there was honor given to Adam because of how God created them and what God
Some level of
talks about them. Yeah.
sentience. Yeah, and
Yes,
choice and
the
things.
fact
Yeah.
that Adam can make a choice, that Adam was given certain knowledge from God, that
Mm-hmm.
Adam was given the ruh, the soul, sort of. I think the best translation would be
What
soul,
what'd you
right?
say? Ru?
Ruh, yes.
Spell it in English?
Ruh, ruh,
Okay.
right?
This is very similar to the Hebrew word ruach, meaning breath
Sort of, yes,
or
because that's
spirit.
pretty much it. The spirit
Okay.
from God, right?
I was just doing a free association, was wondering if that was correct.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Hebrew and Arabic, they're sister languages in the sense that both are Semitic. They
Yeah.
trace a lot of origin from similar sources, given that most of the knowledge that Jews have today come from their
Mm-hmm.
prophets, and the
Yeah.
knowledge that we have today come from our prophet.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those knowledges we believe trace back to God Himself. So
I believe
God
so
is
too,
Abba.
actually.
Yeah. So in that sense, a lot of these terms are very similar. Like
I'm
when
sorry I sidetracked you. I really wanted you to finish speaking about the garden.
yeah, so Adam and Eve were sent into this garden. It was meant to give them the ability to make a choice, and
Okay.
within the exercise of that ability, there was a distinction made in it's described in the Quran how when Adam made a choice which was not in accordance with God, he
Okay.
chose after that to seek forgiveness from God, humble himself, seek forgiveness from God.
Okay.
Whereas when we look at Satan, he made a choice of not bowing down to Adam,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when he made that choice and God asked him why he chose to disobey God, right? He said that I am better than Adam, I am better than him, right?
Smokeless fire and all that.
Fire versus mud, right?
Yeah.
And you led me astray. So he blamed it on God, essentially, and
Okay.
he basically became one of those who incurred God's wrath. So yes, Satan would be one of the first dwellers of hellfire.
Okay.
So
So what do you make of this? Because I know that you are told by Christians that Quran is wrong. So what does that mean to you? That means Christians are wrong. But I want
um
to point out one of the prejudices that Christians have in concern of the text that they say is fundamental and true word of God, and how they misquote it. Here we are at Genesis 2:8. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Now, I've looked up each of those words. That's a pretty clean translation. It's
right.
definitely representative of the right idea. So this says Adam and Eve were made, formed outside of the garden and put there,
Yeah. So
which is the same thing the Quran says.
pretty much the understanding of how Adam was made is that his body was created from mud from different parts of earth, not from heaven, but from earth. So his body
Yes.
was created of um, earthly things, right? And there's an interesting story that the Prophet, peace be upon him, told us about the creation that when Adam was created, when God fashioned Adam, he left the
Mm-hmm.
body as is for a while, and Satan had an encounter with the body. And when Satan encountered the body, he was curious. He tried to find out what it was, and when he got close to it, right, and interacted with it, he got afraid of the body because at this time there was no ruh in the body. There was
Okay.
no knowledge given to Adam. This was just
Okay.
the body itself. So the
Yeah.
Muslims believe, sort of speaking, that human beings constitute of three different aspects. The God created us three clear things, which He's described. The first is our body, which has been described to be very terrestrial, which is very earthly, right? Then
Right.
God sent the ruh in us. So that's the second part, which is the soul, which is um, the spirit in us, right? And then the third part is the knowledge that God gave Adam. God taught Adam the names of things, and when he tested the other creation, right, they weren't aware of that. Adam was able to inform all the other creation of the names of those things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then basically that showed that human beings have a certain knowledge which is different from what other creation have, right? So so those three things, the knowledge, the spirit or ruh, the and the body, those are the three things that we are made of. And when Satan had that interaction with God, he blamed us in the sense that we are lower than him because we're made of mud. He sort of forgot to, or he purposefully kept out the other two aspects of us that make us better than the other creation.
Okay.
Yeah. So the whole aspect of that story, and the reason why it's sort of described in the Quran, is to give us an idea about what our purpose is. Right? Human beings, we believe, are meant to. We're meant to stutter in our life. We're meant to uh, fall
Trip.
down. We're trip,
Trip. Fall.
and
Okay.
basically we will make mistakes. We will be committing sins, right? But the idea is that after committing a sin, you need to follow the example of our forefather and seek forgiveness rather than follow the example of Satan and be arrogant about it, right? That you commit a sin and then you become arrogant. That I know I've done that, but it's not because of me. It's because of whatever reason we come up with, right? So at the end of the day, no matter what happens, whatever, whenever people are, you can bring it down to that aspect. It comes down to that one aspect, whether you're uh, seeking a way out, forgiveness, or whether you're uh, seeking to stand on your uh, arrogance, essentially, that no, it wasn't me, it was something else or someone else, pretty much.
Yeah, I understand that unlike some other religions, actually Islam is big on personal responsibility.
Extremely,
Mm-hmm.
extremely huge. Like, the idea is that you need to make that choice to accept God as your one true God, right? That there is no God, no entity other than the entity that created this whole universe, this whole reality, as the only entity being worthy of worship. Now that's his right. That's what we believe, that if that entity is that powerful, is that at that level, right? It's only his right to be worshipped. Anything else you're worshiping is sort of an insult to that entity. And that's the one thing that entity asks. It's the right of that entity to be that we submit ourselves to him. Because he, Richard, when you think about it, you don't even know about your next breath, right? You don't control your breathing. You don't make a conscious choice to take in oxygen or take in something else. It's happening all by itself, right? So we don't control anything
Somewhat.
in our life. It's
Okay. Go on.
it's very
I don't want to be too
mechanical when you,
pedantic. I mean, I see what you're getting at.
yeah. But what I'm trying to point out here is that when it comes down to it, you're not really in control of a lot of things, except
Oh,
for the
that's certainly
choices that
true.
you make. Except for the choices. That's it.
There's argument to be made. You're not in charge of your own choices. You ever heard about that?
Uh, yes, I have, but at the same time, I don't really believe in that, because I think, and use the word believe very clearly, right? Because
Okay.
there are certain things where it's not about proof, because you cannot prove anything either way. It's about belief at that point, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
So whether or not it's a choice that you're making, right? Or if it's not a choice, it's about what you believe to be true. And I do believe in that sense that people have the ability to choose, right? And for people who deny that, I think the first thing you can do is just slap them and say that this was just part of nature. Then why are you holding me accountable for slapping you? And then beat them up. And why are you holding me accountable for beating you up? I mean, it just becomes absurd, the idea
Yes.
that you are not responsible for your choices.
I think it's we're gonna have to wrap this up, unless someone else comes in to keep talking to you. Um, because I intended to either have several people on stream or go about an hour, and I've done almost double that. Um, Although you could interact with side chat and make arguments with my friend George loves to argue. Maybe he would argue with you, or TP Seeker, he might argue with you. Um, you could interact with those, but I'm going to need to take a break very soon. But I'm going to give
Yeah,
you a
I'm
chance to make a choice, and then either wrap up or engage in whatever way you think is best. But before we go that far, um, there was something. Here we go. Perfect and sinless. I find it true in my experience. Tell me if I'm wrong. That each of these quotes that you're giving and the opinions you're giving on these quotes are precisely the same as I have heard espoused by quote unquote the preacher. And I'm just wondering if you are the preacher or a friend of the preacher, the YouTube channel, the guy that runs it. Just curious. You might be one and the same, and you might just be agreeing with each other. I don't know. Okay, so what's your preference of things to do? Would you rather wrap up everything you've asserted tonight and call it quits? Would you rather
I
engage
might
with
I might
side
just
chat?
do that because I do have a long 2.5 hour drive tomorrow,
Oh, wow.
which I need to prepare for really early in the morning. So
And
I'm probably gonna call it quits. I was
what's your time
intending to call it
zone?
quits here.
Just so I can
I'm at
refresh
the
because I need to.
Eastern Standard Time. So
Eastern Standard. Okay.
yeah, so it's 10:30 now, and I
Okay.
need to be up in sort of 6 hours or so.
Well, Faisal, I certainly appreciate your accommodating attitude and generosity in being willing to talk about what you believe is true. I certainly appreciate that.
No, thank you, Richard, for giving me the opportunity as well. And like I
That's a
said,
pleasure.
I do like coming on your channel. It's one of the few channels where I can. I don't go on too many channels. It's on your channel. It's sort of easy to have a disagreement with someone, as long as
Yeah.
it's not being sort of um, outnumbered, pretty much at times. But at
Well,
times
it's
I
bound to
do.
happen here and there.
It
Yeah.
is, it is, and it's fine. But I do like having the one-on-one conversation mostly because then you can um, I challenge my ideas. If you think that
Sure.
I'm not coherent, if I'm not making sense, if my idea is based on um, facts, not based on facts, not based on proven facts, or not based on logical assumptions, right? Challenge them.
Right.
I find it very refreshing because it sort of gives me the opportunity to grow and revise my own ideas. And I think I just hope that I'm able to help people understand their point of view as well. Right?
I think it's important that we all consider and consider different beliefs and different positions so that we can use that to critique our own. Hopefully, we're honest enough to do that. Thank you again, Faisal. I
All right.
appreciate you come by. Come by again sometime when you have a few minutes.
Sure. Take care. Have a nice day. Peace and respect.
Peace and respect. All right, guys. We're going to wrap this up. You're not a friend of the preacher. He preaches works. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I don't know everything that he preaches, so that's okay. All right. Thanks, everybody who showed up and watching. I appreciate you coming in and commenting. Of course, you've heard this whole pitch before. Algorithms care that you voted, so please vote. Of course, I'm biased, and I think what I'm saying is true, which means I think that's important in reality and would help people adjust to what is actual, which means they have opportunity to be happier rather than not so well adjusted and not as happy. So there's my motivation for doing this at all. And those kinds of parameters are completely dependent on how many of you vote on the video, comment on the video, the whole thing. Okay. So if you think it's possible that these things could be right, spread it around by acting on those parameters. And if you think I'm just a crazy joke, I don't know why you're still here. Except if you came in to correct me, I'd appreciate that. TP, I understand that it all does sound the same to you. In fact, I understand from my prior atheism that probably a lot of the things that religious people say, it just sounds like crazy fan fiction. We may as well be talking about what kind of underwear is preferred by Spider-Man's aunt. Might as well be talking about that. Yeah, true, right? Okay, guys. Peace and respect to you all. Know that I look forward to the day that we're all great friends. Till next time.